I'll give $1 million right now to whoever can open this safe.
A billionaire accidentally locked his dog inside a safe. The tragic irony? The safe's passcode was hanging right on the dog's collar. Numerous master locksmiths were called in, but after hours of struggling, the vault remained completely shut. Then, a young woman stepped forward.
I'm gonna open it.
The billionaire scoffed at her with clear disdain.
Did your dad teach you that? We aren't taking exams here. This door isn't something just anyone can open. Scram, go home, black girl.
I know more than your money ever taught you.
Get out!
Yet, amused by her sheer stubbornness, he stood back and waited, fully intending to teach her a lesson in failure. Little did he know, he was the one about to be schooled.
I'm not going anywhere until I've opened this safe.
Richard Sterling, 58 years old, third-generation heir to the Sterling industrial fortune, walked his marble hallways the way other men paced prison yards, slowly, repeatedly, with nothing waiting at either end. His wife, Margaret, had died 6 years earlier of pancreatic cancer. His 2 sons had moved to the West Coast and stopped calling on holidays. The staff at Ashford Manor numbered 11, and Richard did not know more than 4 of their names. He preferred it that way. Names create obligations, he had told his butler once. Obligations create weakness. My father taught me that when I was 9 years old. The only living creature in that house Richard Sterling truly loved was a 4-year-old golden retriever named Muffin. The dog slept at the foot of his bed. The dog rode in the passenger seat of his Bentley. The dog ate scrambled eggs from Richard's own plate every morning while the kitchen staff pretended not to notice. When Margaret was dying, she had asked Richard for one thing on her last conscious afternoon. Get a dog, Richard. Promise me, Margaret, please don't talk like that. You'll need someone to love when I'm gone. Promise me you won't be alone. I promise. 6 months after the funeral, he drove to a breeder in upstate New York and came back with a small golden puppy that fit in the crook of his arm. He named him Muffin because Margaret had loved breakfast more than any meal of the day. In the basement of Ashford Manor, behind 2 reinforced doors and a biometric scanner, stood the Carrington Vault X9. 14 tons of Hardox 450 steel, triple locking mechanism, mechanical tumbler outside, magnetic field interlock in the middle, biometric retina scanner at the core. The vault changed its primary combination every 7 days, generated by an algorithm Richard himself did not understand. The printed code was issued each Monday morning and stored in a single physical location that Richard trusted above any safe in Manhattan, inside Muffin's leather collar sewn behind the brass nameplate. It had been Margaret's idea years ago. No thief would ever check a dog's collar, she had whispered to him in bed one night, laughing softly. Promise me you'll use it. It's the perfect hiding place. You're a genius, Margaret. I know. For 4 years, the system had never failed. Inside the vault, Richard kept 3 things: the original patents to Sterling Industries, his revised last will and testament, and one folded letter written in Margaret's handwriting on hospital stationery 3 days before she died. He had not opened that letter in 6 years. He had never been able to. The catastrophe began on a Monday morning at 9 sharp. Richard walked downstairs to deposit a signed bond certificate. Muffin padded behind him. He keyed in the weekly code, the door released, and he stepped inside. His cell phone rang. Tokyo. What now? I told you not before noon. The board call could not be ignored. He stepped back into the antechamber, pulled the heavy door behind him, and began arguing about quarterly figures. 4 minutes later, he ended the call. He turned and called for the dog. Muffin, come. Silence. Muffin. His blood went cold. The vault was locked. The dog was inside, and inside Muffin's collar was the only printed copy of this week's combination. No. Richard lunged at the door. He punched in the previous week's code. Denied. He punched in random sequences. Denied. The system locked him out for 10 minutes. He sank to the floor and listened to the small, frantic scratching from the other side. By noon, he had called every security consultant on his payroll. By Clay, the head of Carrington Industrial, had given him the verdict. Mr. Sterling, listen to me carefully. You cannot drill it. You cannot cut it. Any breach triggers the epoxy flood. Your dog dies instantly. The only way in is by hand. Then send me a man who can do it, Richard. The men who could do that work retired 20 years ago. Most of them are dead. By Monday evening, 12 had arrived at Ashford Manor anyway. The youngest was 45. The oldest was 73. Richard met them in the foyer, jaw clenched. $50,000 to the first man who opens that door. $100,000 if it's tonight. They worked through the night. They worked through Tuesday. They worked through Tuesday night. By Wednesday afternoon, they had not made the vault click once. The oldest among them, a white-haired locksmith named Thomas Pendleton, finally sat down on the marble floor and shook his head. "Richard, we can't do it. I'm sorry. You're not sorry yet. You will be." 45 minutes north in a small locksmith shop on Quantick Street in Bridgeport, a young woman was closing up for the day when her phone buzzed. She was 24 years old. Her name was Maya Jackson. She had graduated 3 months earlier from MIT with a master's degree in advanced security engineering, top of her class, but had returned home to keep her late father's storefront running because her mother could not bear to see it close. She read the alert. Her mother's voice came from the back room. "What is it, baby?" "A vault in Greenwich, Carrington X9. They can't open it." Her mother stepped into the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Harper, don't. There's a dog inside." "Mama." "Harper, that family. You know what they did to your father, I know. Then leave it." Maya looked down at her left hand. The silver ring on her index finger caught the late afternoon light. She had not taken it off since the day of her father's funeral. "Mama, Daddy would go." Her mother said nothing for a long moment. Then she nodded once and turned back to the kitchen. Maya picked up her keys and got into her old pickup truck. She did not know yet that within 24 hours, she would say one sentence that would unravel 60 years of a man's pride. She only knew that somewhere in Greenwich, a dog was running out of air. And 130 years of Davis' hands were waiting in her fingers for a moment exactly like this one. The wrought iron gates of Ashford Manor swung open on Wednesday afternoon at 3:42. Maya Jackson drove her old pickup up the long gravel driveway and parked beside a row of black sedans belonging to men who had failed for 2 days straight. The butler opened the front door before she could knock. White gloves, narrow eyes, taking in the jeans and the worn leather toolkit. "Deliveries are at the rear entrance. I'm not a delivery. Mr. Sterling is expecting locksmiths. He has 12 already. Then he can have 13. Down a long marble corridor, a man's voice cracked the air. "Where the hell is everyone? Bring them up here now." Maya stepped past the butler without waiting. He sputtered behind her, but she was already walking toward the sound. The basement stairs were carpeted in deep burgundy. At the bottom, a wide chamber opened under crystal sconces, and there it stood. The Carrington Vault X9, 14 tons of black steel. The digital readout above the dial glowed red. 45 hours, 18 minutes remaining. 12 men in rumpled shirts looked up from where they slumped against the walls. Their tools lay scattered. Their faces were gray. In the center of the room, palms pressed flat against the cold steel, stood Richard Sterling. He turned. He saw her. His face changed in a way that was unmistakable. "Who let her in?" The butler appeared, breathless. "Sir," she insisted, "get her out." Maya did not move. "Mr. Sterling, I'm a licensed locksmith. I came to help." Richard laughed. Not the laugh of a man amused. The laugh of a man insulted by the existence of a person in his foyer. "A locksmith. You. How old are you, sweetheart?" 24. He turned to the 12 men, theatrically appealing to them. "Gentlemen, I have spent $50,000 on the finest locksmiths in this state, and this little girl thinks she's going to walk in off the street and do what you couldn't." One younger man chuckled. The oldest, Thomas Pendleton, did not. He was staring at Harper's left hand. "Mr. Sterling, may I look at the vault?" "You may look at the door on your way out." She did not move. She looked at the readout. She looked at the door. Then she looked at him. "Your dog has about 40 hours of oxygen, Mr. Sterling. Maybe less if he's panting. You can throw me out or you can let me look for 5 minutes. Your choice." The room went silent. Richard's jaw worked. 5 minutes. Don't touch anything. Maya set down her toolkit and walked to the vault. She pressed her right ear against the steels and closed her eyes. "What are you doing?" "Praying." "Listening. Listening to what?" "It's a door. It's a Carrington X9. Third revision, the bolts retract on a magnetic field pulse. At the seam, you can hear the standby coil hum. It tells you which lock layer is active." A few of the older locksmiths sat up straighter. Richard's smile faltered for half a second. "You read that on the internet?" "I read it in my father's notebook when I was 9. "Your father, right? And who was that?" "A janitor at a bank." Maya opened her eyes. She turned her head without rising. "My father was Arthur Jackson." The name meant nothing to him. He shrugged. "Charming." But Thomas Pendleton made a small sound in his throat. A sound like a man recognizing something he had not heard in many years. Harper's eyes flicked to him. He gave her the smallest nod. She turned back to the door. "I can open this, but I need permission to work, and your 12 men need to stand back. And if I say no, then your dog dies on Friday and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing a black girl from Bridgeport offered to save him, and you said no because of how she looked." The room stopped breathing. Richard stepped forward, his finger jabbed at her chest. "I built this estate. this fortune, this name with my own two hands. I do not need a charity case from the inner city walking into my home. You didn't build it. Your grandfather did, and he stole half of what he built. Everyone in this trade knows that. A locksmith in the back coughed into his fist. Richard's voice dropped to a venomous quiet. What did you say? I said, your dog has 40 hours. Let me work or send me home, but stop wasting his oxygen on your pride. Get out. No. Get out of my house, Richard. The voice came from the staircase. Thomas Pendleton had stood up. 73 years old, hands like worn leather. He stopped beside Harper. Richard, you're going to want to listen to her. Thomas, this is not your concern. It is. In 50 years, I have never watched a man choose pride over his dog's life. I'm not starting today. That ring on her finger, do you know what it is? Jewelry. It is the Davis ring, forged in 1889, Birmingham, Alabama, by a freeman named Marcus Jackson. 4 generations of the finest locksmiths this country has produced. The father you just dismissed helped design the magnetic interlock inside the vault you cannot open. The room went still. Richard stared at Thomas, then at Harper, then at the ring. Something in his face nearly cracked. Then the contempt slammed back harder than before. Touching story, get her out. Maya picked up her toolkit. She walked to the stairs. She stopped at the bottom step and turned. Mr. Sterling, I'll be at the gate. When your dog has 8 hours left, you're going to come find me. And by then, I'll be the only person on earth who can open that door. She walked up the stairs. Richard stood in the middle of his vault chamber. 12 exhausted men staring at him. And for the first time in 30 years, he felt something he could not name crawling up the back of his neck. The readout ticked down. 44 hours, 59 minutes. Outside, Maya sat in her pickup, hands shaking on the wheel. She closed her eyes and whispered the words her father had taught her when she was 12 and a customer had spat in her face. Steady hands, baby girl. Steady hands, open every door. She did not start the engine. Thomas Pendleton had given her a nod. Some doors, her father used to say, only open from the inside. Inside the vault chamber, the silence after Harper's exit was the loudest thing Richard Sterling had heard in years. The readout ticked. 44 hours, 56 minutes. Thomas Pendleton did not return to his place against the wall. He stood at the bottom of the staircase, arms crossed. You're going to bring her back, Richard. I am going to do no such thing. Then your dog dies, and so does the last piece of your wife's promise. Richard turned on him. Don't you dare speak about Margaret. Then act like a man she could be proud of. The two of them stood 6 feet apart in a chamber meant to hold a fortune. Richard looked at the vault. The scratching had grown weaker. He could only hear the faintest brush of a paw against the steel. He turned to the 12 men. None of you can open it. One by one, they shook their heads. The oldest among them, Arthur Calloway from Hartford, finally spoke. Mr. Sterling, I have been a locksmith for 46 years. The girl who just walked out of this room knows that door better than any man in this chamber, including me. Why? Calloway looked at Thomas. Thomas nodded. Because her father designed the lock layer. None of us can crack. Richard's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Thomas took a slow step forward. His voice was quiet now. Arthur Jackson was the lead engineer on the Carrington magnetic interlock from 1998 to 2003. The patent was filed under Carrington Industrial, but the design was his. When he tried to start his own firm in 2004, Richard, the industry, blacklisted him. Within 18 months, he was bankrupt. He died last March. His daughter buried him in a suit she sewed herself because she couldn't afford the funeral home's package. Richard did not move, and the men who blacklisted him. Do you remember a conference in Boston 1998 where a young black engineer presented a paper on magnetic field bolt retraction, and an heir to a Connecticut fortune stood up and asked in front of 300 people whether the speaker had stolen his research from a white colleague? Do you remember saying that, Richard? The blood drained out of Richard's face. He remembered the laugh from the audience. That was Arthur Jackson. The only difference now is that his daughter is sitting outside your gate willing to save your dog anyway. The question is, what you're going to do with that? The readout ticked. 44 hours, 41 minutes. Richard walked to the vault. He pressed his forehead against the cold steel. The scratching had stopped completely. He could only hear very faintly his dog's labored breathing. Muffin, he whispered. No answer. When he turned, his eyes were wet. Tell her to come back. Tell her yourself. You owe her father an apology, Richard. The least you can do is walk to your own gate. Richard Sterling walked up the basement stairs alone. He walked through his marble foyer. He pushed open his own front door. He walked down the gravel driveway in his $10, zero-cent Italian shoes. His own house looked for the first time in 30 years like a place he was visiting. Maya sat in her pickup with the window rolled down. She was watching a sparrow on the gravel. Miss Davis. She did not turn. Miss Davis, I am asking you to come back inside. A long pause. Maya finally turned her head. Why? Because my dog is dying and I was wrong. About what? About all of it. She studied him. He did not look away. Mr. Sterling, before I come back in there, I need to hear you say one thing. Anything. Say my father's name. His throat worked. He had to swallow twice. Arthur. Arthur Jackson. Again, Arthur Jackson. Your father was Arthur Jackson. Maya closed her eyes. When she opened them, something in her face had softened. Not forgiveness. Something earlier than forgiveness. The willingness to begin. She opened the truck door. I'll need my full toolkit, Thomas Pendleton, and nobody else in that chamber except you. Done. And one more thing. When this door opens, you are going to look at what's inside it. Whatever it is. He did not understand. He nodded anyway. They walked back up the gravel driveway together. The sun was lowering behind the hedges. Inside the vault, 14 tons of steel away, the small golden creature Margaret Sterling had given her husband 6 years ago lay on his side, breathing slow. The readout ticked. 44 hours, 16 minutes. And in Harper's pocket, folded against the silver ring on her finger, was a single page from her father's notebook that no one at Carrington Industrial had seen in 20 years. Maya stepped back into the vault chamber with her toolkit over her shoulder. The 12 men had cleared the room, all except Thomas Pendleton. Richard stood near the door, hands at his sides, looking like a man who had aged 5 years in the time it took to walk down a driveway. The readout ticked. 44 hours, 12 minutes. Maya knelt and opened her toolkit on the marble. What she pulled out was nothing the other men had brought. A medical stethoscope, a handheld magnetometer the size of a deck of cards, a worn leather notebook with cracked binding, a glass tuning fork in a velvet pouch, and wrapped in soft cloth, a thin steel ring threaded with copper filament that she set carefully beside her knee. Richard watched in silence. Thomas let out a slow breath. Harper, is that your father's resonance tool? Yes, sir. He finished it 3 weeks before he died. He tested it on a Carrington prototype the week before his heart attack. Thomas shook his head slowly. I never thought I'd see the day. Richard finally spoke. What is it? Maya did not look up. A tuning instrument. Carrington X9 magnetic interlocks resonate at exactly 432 hertz when the standby coil is active. My father designed this to read that signature. It tells you which of the 3 field generators is engaged and at what phase. Without it, you have to guess. Most locksmiths guess wrong. Richard glanced at Thomas. Thomas nodded once slowly. He tried to sell that tool to Carrington in 2003. Richard. They told him the design was proprietary because he had been an employee when he sketched it. They took the patent and gave him nothing. Richard closed his eyes. Maya kept working. She placed the stethoscope against the seam of the vault and began moving it in slow, deliberate arcs, listening for something only she could hear. After 2 minutes, she stopped at a point about chest height on the right edge. Thomas Field 3 is hot. You sure? Listen. She handed him the stethoscope. He pressed it against the steel, his eyes closed. After a few seconds, his eyebrows lifted. I'll be damned. I never could hear that without the tool. My father taught me to hear it without the tool, in case the tool ever broke. He said a real locksmith should be able to do everything with just their hands and ears. The tool was only there to make it faster. Thomas handed the stethoscope back. He looked at Richard. That's what you blacklisted, Richard. That kind of mind. Richard did not respond. He could not. Maya opened her father's notebook to a page near the middle. It was filled with hand-drawn diagrams in pencil, cross-sections of a vault mechanism, notes in a careful slanted handwriting. She studied it for a long moment, then set it on the floor and stood. Mr. Sterling, I need to ask you some questions. The answers will determine whether I can open it in time. Ask, when was the last weekly code rotation completed? Monday morning 9, about 4 minutes before I closed the door on him. Then the active field is still in its first weak phase. Good. Has anyone tried to drill or force the outer shell in the last 44 hours? No. Carrington warned me about the epoxy. Good. Has the dial been spun more than 3 full rotations in the wrong direction by any of the previous locksmiths? Richard turned to Thomas. Thomas shook his head. We tested gentle. Nobody panicked the mechanism that I have a clean entry path. The vault doesn't know I'm coming. She slid the silver ring off her index finger. She held it up to the light. Richard saw for the first time that the inner band was etched with 3 tiny markings almost invisible to the naked eye. Mr. Sterling, this ring contains a magnetic signature my father embedded during the design phase of your vault. He never told Carrington about it. He embedded it as a personal fail-safe in case any of his own designs ever needed to be bypassed for emergency entry. He told me about it on the day I turned 12. Richard stared at the ring. Your father built a back door into my vault. He built one into every Carrington magnetic interlock manufactured between 1998 and 2003. About 400 of them installed worldwide. He never used it. He never told anyone. He said it wasn't for thieves. It was for emergencies. The silence in the room was complete. Thomas spoke very quietly. Arthur told me once 20 years ago that he had built something into the design no one would ever find. I thought he was joking. He wasn't joking. Richard sat down on the marble floor. His knees would not hold him. Miss Davis, why didn't your father use this to prove the design was his? Maya slid the ring back onto her finger. Because he was a better man than the industry that broke him. He said the ring was for emergencies only. Using it for anything else would make him no different from the people who stole from him. She knelt back by her toolkit and picked up the resonance instrument. With your permission, Mr. Sterling, I'll begin the entry sequence. About 6 hours of preparation, then 38 seconds to open. 6 hours. The preparation has to be exact. If I rush, I trigger the epoxy. If I do it right, the door opens like a kiss. Richard nodded. He could not speak. Maya looked at the readout. 44 hours, 4 minutes. We have time. Thomas, I'll need you on the magnetometer at the south corner. Mr. Sterling, you do exactly one thing. Sit there. Don't speak unless I ask. When I call your name, you come immediately. Understood? Understood? She lifted the resonance fork. She struck it against the brass clasp of her toolkit. A pure, clear note rang out across the marble chamber, and as it traveled, the inner panel of the vault, just for an instant, gave back the faintest answering hum. Thomas Pendleton closed his eyes. My God. Harper. It's listening. It's been listening for 20 years. It's just been waiting for the right hand. Richard Sterling, sitting on the marble floor of his own vault chamber, watched a 24-year-old woman do something with sound and steel that he had not believed was possible. Somewhere in the back of his throat, the word he had refused to say for 58 years began to form for the very first time. The readout ticked. 43 hours, 58 minutes, and Muffin behind 14 tons of steel faintly, almost imperceptibly lifted his head. The next 6 hours unfolded with the suspended quality of a surgery. Maya worked with the focus of someone who had been preparing for this her whole life without knowing it. Thomas moved when she told him to move. Richard sat on the marble floor, silent. By the 6th hour, the 12 old locksmiths had come back down and gathered along the walls. Arthur Calloway from Hartford, the young one from Stamford, the skeptic from New Haven, who had laughed when she walked in. None of them spoke. Maya had not noticed them arrive. She was on her knees in front of the vault, the silver ring on her finger pressed against a small port on the lower right edge of the door. Thomas Fay's reading steady at 4:32. No drift. Richard. He looked up. It was the first time she had used his first name. He scrambled to his feet. Yes. Come stand by the dial. 3 feet in the field, but not in my way. He obeyed without question. Maya closed her father's notebook and looked up at him. Mr. Hay, before I open this door, I need to say something out loud. Once it opens, the moment passes, and I will not say it again. The room held its breath. My name is Maya Jackson, 4th-generation locksmith. My great-great-grandfather, Marcus Jackson, was born into slavery in Alabama in 1848. Freed in 1865, a German immigrant in Birmingham taught him the trade. In 1889, he became the first black licensed locksmith in Alabama. He built the locks for the black churches that the Klan kept burning down. She breathed. My great-grandfather, Nathaniel Jackson, invented the first multi-tumbler residential lock in America. He filed for a patent in 1936. A white-owned firm in Chicago stole the design and made $11 million off it. He died in a one-room apartment in Detroit, 68 years old, with $18 in his pocket. A locksmith against the wall cleared his throat against a feeling he had not expected to feel. My grandfather, Calvin Jackson, graduated from MIT in 1955. No firm in America would hire him. He opened a small shop on Pequannock Street in Bridgeport. He taught my father everything he knew. Richard had gone very pale. My father, Arthur Jackson, was the lead engineer on the Carrington magnetic interlock from 1998 to 2003. He was blacklisted out of his own industry. He died last March. I sewed his suit myself. And on the morning of his funeral, I put this ring on my finger, and I have not taken it off since. She held up her left hand. This ring was forged by Marcus in 1889, 136 years, 4 generations. And in 2001, my father in secret used this ring as the master signature for a fail-safe he built into every Carrington X9 vault on Earth. She looked at Richard. Your vault was not built by Carrington, Mr. Sterling. It was built by my father. The corporation put their name on it, he put his soul into it, and he gave it the ability to know his daughter's hand. That is why no one else here can open it. Richard's mouth opened. And I want you to remember when this door opens in the next 38 seconds that you stood in your foyer 6 hours ago and called me Blackie. You called my father a stinking rat. You said those words to his daughter in front of 12 witnesses. The room did not move. I am opening this door because Muffin is innocent and because my father taught me that a locksmith opens doors. We do not slam them, not even on men who deserve it. She turned back to the vault. She placed the silver ring against the port. She struck the resonance fork one final time. The pure tone filled the chamber. The vault answered. Thomas whispered almost reverently, "Harper, the field is yours." Maya closed her eyes. 38 seconds, gentlemen. Watch the door. Behind her, Richard Sterling lowered himself onto the marble floor with both hands, as if some structural beam inside his body had finally given way. The 12 locksmiths along the walls did not breathe. The dial began to turn. The dial began to turn under Harper's right hand, slowly with purpose. Each notch met with the faintest mechanical sigh from somewhere deep inside the door. A sound the 12 locksmiths along the wall had never heard a Carrington X9 make in their lives. The countdown on the readout shifted into a smaller display. 0038, then 037, then 036. Maya did not look at it. Second 38 to 32. She rotated the dial 7 full turns counterclockwise. The motion was so smooth, it looked rehearsed. She had practiced this exact sequence on a cardboard mock-up in her bedroom every night for 6 years. Beginning the week, her father first told her what the ring contained. 7 turns counterclockwise. Pause. Thomas watched the magnetometer. Field 1 releasing. A deep low theet sounded from inside the door. One of the locksmiths against the wall gasped audibly. Another whispered something under his breath that sounded like prayer. Second 31 to 25. Maya switched her grip. She entered a sequence of 12 precise digits on a recessed keypad below the dial, using only her left index finger, the one wearing the ring. Each tap rang against the metal like a small bell. She did not look at the keypad. Her eyes were on the seam of the door, watching for a tiny indicator light her father had built into the design that only someone who knew the schematic by heart would ever notice. The indicator blinked green. Field 2 releasing, Thomas said. A second thunk, deeper than the first. The chamber seemed to vibrate through the marble itself. Richard Sterling pressed a hand against the floor to steady himself. His other hand was clenched into a fist against his chest. Second 24 to 18. Maya lifted her right palm and pressed it flat against the steel of the door just below the dial. The silver ring made direct contact with the metal. The standby coil sensors inside the vault read the magnetic signature of the ring. That signature her father had encoded into the design in 2001 and never told a single human being on Earth about. Not his colleagues, not his employer, not even his own wife, only his daughter. The vault paused for one long, terrible second. Nothing happened. A locksmith against the wall whispered, "It's not reading. It's not reading." Maya did not move. She did not blink. She had been told on a quiet evening when she was 12 years old, sitting on the floor of her father's workshop with the smell of pipe tobacco in the air, that the vault would test her, that it would pause exactly here, that she must wait. Then a high, clear tone rang from somewhere inside the steel. Not a buzzer, a note, a musical note, 432 hertz. Thomas Pendleton made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sob. "It's recognizing her, Richard. The vault is recognizing her." Second 17 to 11, the biometric retina scanner above the dial lit up amber. This was the final lock layer. Carrington had designed it to read only the registered owner's retina, Richard's retina, and Maya Jackson was not Richard Sterling. She did not flinch. She had known this moment would come. Her father had told her exactly what to do when it did. "Richard," now he scrambled forward on his knees. "Stand up slowly. Face the scanner. Do not move your eyes until it confirms." He stood. He pressed his face into the recessed cradle. The scanner beam crossed his pupil. The reading came back red, denied. A locksmith against the wall hissed through his teeth. "Oh, God." Richard's whole body went rigid. Harper, it failed. She did not panic. She placed her ring finger against a tiny groove on the right side of the scanner housing. A groove no one else in the room would have known existed. A groove no schematic in any Carrington manual had ever shown. Richard again now. He pressed his face back into the cradle. The scanner pulsed once, twice, a third time. The reading came back green, confirmed. The third thunk rolled through the chamber longer than the others, the sound of 14 tons of steel releasing the last bolt that held it shut. The floor itself seemed to tremble. Second 10 to 4. Maya stepped back from the door. She held her right hand against the dial one final time. Thomas held his breath. Richard held his breath. The 12 locksmiths held their breath. She turned the dial, 3 small clicks to the right, 2 small clicks to the left, 1 final click to the right. The vault exhaled. A puff of cool, stale air escaped from the seam. The smell of old steel, machine oil, and something else. Something Richard had not smelled in 6 years and could not name. The seal of 14 tons of steel against 14 tons of marble released with a hiss that sounded almost grateful. Second 3, second 2, second 1. The dial settled. The door began to swing open under its own weight. 0. The chamber froze. No one moved. No one spoke. The door swung outward 5 in, 10, 20 a foot. A small, exhausted golden head lifted from the floor of the vault. Muffin blinked into the light. He saw Richard. He let out the smallest, most broken little whimper any living creature has ever made. And then, on legs that could barely hold his weight, he stood up. He took one wobbling step, then another. He walked one trembling paw at a time toward his owner. Richard Sterling, 58 years old, third-generation heir to the Sterling industrial fortune, collapsed onto the marble floor and reached out both arms. The dog walked into them. Richard gathered him up like an infant. He pressed his face into the gold fur, and he made a sound that no man in that chamber would ever forget. It was not crying, it was something deeper than crying. It was the sound of a man being given back a piece of his life he had already begun to mourn. He did not stop. He held the dog and he wept into the fur and he whispered the same 3 words over and over. "You're alive, you're alive, you're alive." Muffin licked his face weakly. He was dehydrated and shaking, but he was alive. Maya did not enter the vault. She stepped back. She gave the man his moment. She turned away from the door because some things do not belong to witnesses. Behind her in the vault on a small shelf at the back sat a folded letter on hospital stationery. Margaret Sterling's handwriting on the front, 6 years untouched. Thomas Pendleton walked quietly to Harper's side. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Harper. She did not turn. She was watching her father's reflection in the polished steel of the open door. She could almost see him standing behind her, nodding once the way he used to nod when she got something right at the workbench when she was 12 years old. "He would be proud of you, Harper. He always was." Thomas's voice cracked. "I should have done more back then. When they were doing it to him, I should have stood up. I'm sorry I didn't. You stood up today, Thomas. That counts." He would have said it counts. The 12 locksmiths along the wall did something none of them had planned. They did not applaud. Applause would have been wrong. One of them, the skeptic from New Haven, the one who had laughed when she walked in, slowly stood up straight against the wall. He took off the cap he had been wearing for 2 days. He held it against his chest. The man from Stamford did the same. Arthur Calloway from Hartford did the same. One by one, 12 white-haired locksmiths in rumpled shirts stood at attention in a billionaire's basement and took their caps off for a 24-year-old black woman whose father had been the best of all of them and whose name they had never been allowed to know. Richard looked up from the floor. His face was wet. Muffin was breathing slow and steady against his chest. He looked at Harper. He could not stand. He could not speak. He tried twice and failed both times. He bowed his head from his knees to the floor, forehead against the cold marble. It was not the bow of a billionaire. It was the bow of a man who had finally understood the size of his own ignorance. The readout above the vault clicked over to a new line. Vault open. Subject recovered. And in Harper's pocket, against the silver ring that 136 years of Davis' hands had held, her father's voice seemed to whisper from somewhere far away. "Steady hands, baby girl. Steady hands open every door." For a long time, no one moved. Richard remained on his knees with Muffin in his arms, forehead against the marble. The 12 locksmiths stood with their caps against their chests. It was Maya who broke the silence. "Mr. Sterling, your dog needs water and a vet." Richard nodded without speaking. The butler hurried away to call the veterinarian. Maya began packing her toolkit the way her father had taught her. Stethoscope into its case, magnetometer into its sleeve. The silver ring she did not remove. Richard rose, still cradling Muffin. He took 2 unsteady steps toward her. "Miss Davis, I do not have the words. You don't need them. Your father deserved better from me, from this industry, from this country. I am sorrier than I know how to be." Maya looked past him into the vault at the folded letter on the back shelf. "You remember what I told you? When this door opened, you were going to look at what was inside it." He nodded. "Go look." He walked into the vault and stopped in front of the shelf. Margaret's handwriting. He had not opened it in 6 years because he had been afraid of what it might say. He picked it up. His fingers shook. "Read it later," Maya said from the doorway, but read it. The veterinarian arrived within 40 minutes. Muffin drank a full bowl of water. The vet said he would recover in 3 days. Thomas Pendleton walked Maya to the gate. You're not going to take any money from him, are you? I'll take the $50,000 he promised. I'll give it to my mother. She needs a new roof. He's going to offer you more. Then I'll say no to more. Thomas smiled for the first time in 3 days. You sound exactly like him. I know. Richard appeared at the gate, still holding muffins, still holding the unopened letter. Maya rolled down her window. Mr. Sterling, read the letter and say my father's name once a week for as long as you live. That's the price of my forgiveness. She drove down the gravel driveway. In the rearview mirror, Richard Sterling stood at the gate, watching her go. That night, Richard sat alone in his study with the letter on his desk. Muffin slept on the rug at his feet. He opened the envelope. Richard, if you are reading this, then I am gone. You were raised by a hard man. You learned cruelty before you knew kindness. I have loved you anyway, but you are the man your father made. There is a difference. The next time the world hands you a chance to be kinder than he was, take it. That is the only inheritance I want to leave behind. I love you. He set the letter down. He cried for the second time that day. No one was watching. Monday morning, he called Carrington Industrial. This is Richard Sterling. The magnetic interlock patent from 2001, I want it corrected today. Sole designer Arthur Jackson, retroactive settlement to his estate with interest. Mr. Sterling, that's 20 years of today. By Friday, the correction was filed. Harper's mother paid off her mortgage that weekend. In October, Richard announced the Arthur Jackson Engineering Foundation, $200 million, scholarships, tools, apprenticeships for Black engineering students. The press asked him why. He answered on camera, because I called a man a stinking rat once, and his daughter saved my life anyway. The least I can do is help the next Arthur Jackson finish what this one started. He resigned from the Greenwich Industrial Club. He published a public letter naming himself the conference in Boston in 1998 and the words he had used. He did not soften any of it. His sons called him for the first time in 4 years. The older one was crying. Dad, what happened to you? A young woman taught me something. I should have learned it from your mother. We saw the letter. I know. I'm sorry to you, to your brother for all of it. Dad, come visit, please. He flew out the next week. Maya kept her father's shop. She did not move. She did not expand. Within 6 months, she had been invited to consult for the FBI, the Treasury, and 2 private banks. She accepted on her own terms. 3 apprentices, 2 Black, 1 Latina, came to learn from her by the end of the year. She taught them the way Arthur had taught her, hands and ears, baby. Steady hands open every door. Thomas Pendleton retired the following spring. At his dinner, he spoke about Arthur Jackson for 15 minutes straight. When he finished, the entire Connecticut Locksmiths Association stood for a full minute of silence. It was the first time in the association's 80-year history that a Black engineer had been honored from its podium. Richard donated the Carrington X9 to the Smithsonian. It was installed as the centerpiece of an exhibit titled The Hidden Hands. 4 names on the plaque: Marcus Jackson, Nathaniel Jackson, Calvin Jackson, Arthur Jackson. Beneath them in smaller designed in shadow, acknowledged at last. Muffin lived another 8 years. Richard buried him under the magnolia tree. Every year on the anniversary of Arthur's death, Richard drove to Bridgeport. He parked outside the shop on Pequannock Street. He bought a key cut he did not need. He paid cash. He stood in front of the small framed photograph above the register, and he said the name out loud. Arthur Jackson. He had promised he never missed a year. There is a particular kind of cruelty in being underestimated by people who could not do what you do in their wildest dreams. Maya Jackson lived that cruelty for 24 years. Her father lived it for 59. Her great-grandfather died with $18 in his pocket because of it. 4 generations of brilliant hands were forced to wait in shadow for a world that was slow to see them. But here's the truth Richard Sterling learned on a Wednesday afternoon in October. Talent does not disappear because the world refuses to see it. It only waits, sometimes for a year, sometimes for 136, but it waits. And when its moment arrives, no lock, no fortune, no lineage of lies can keep that door shut. Maya did not raise her voice. She did not raise her fist. She raised one finger to a door that 12 men could not open, and she let the truth do the rest. She saved a man's dog. She saved a man from dying as the worst version of himself. And she did it without ever asking for credit because her father had taught her that a locksmith opens doors. We do not slam them. If this story moved you, do one thing. In the comments, write the name of someone in your own family whose talent was overlooked. A grandmother who could have been an engineer. An uncle who never got his patent. Let us fill the comments with the names of people the world refused to see. If you have ever underestimated someone because of how they looked, hit the like button as a small promise to yourself that you will not do it again. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so the next story finds you too.